Hi, everyone. We have some special
Hello.
guest appearances.
Hello.
You remember my daughter Lillian and my nephew Zeke. They're here just hanging out and wanting to hear our chapter 5 pounds of sugar. All good things must come to an end, said Mrs. Sanchez on January 3rd as her sons ate their breakfast. That's a very negative way of looking at things, said Nelson, but it was certainly true about the school vacation. It was time for all three Sanchez boys to return to their studies, and in Mrs. Schellenberg's fourth grade, it was time to begin preparation for the statewide exams. Only Cricket looked happy when their teacher handed out a sheet of problems that looked unfamiliar. As for Julio, he suddenly felt a twinge in his gut. The page that the students were given was made up of 10 math questions, but there were an awful lot of words involved too. You'd think it was a test of reading and not of math. Read each question through completely before you try to answer it, the teacher said. Julio started reading. 1. A fisherman catches a trout that is 28 inches long. In his refrigerator at home, there is a lobster that is 2 feet long. Which is bigger, the trout or the lobster? A. Lobster. B. Trout. C. They are both the same. Or D. Don't have enough information to tell. What could your guess be? Julio started thinking. He was certain that there had never been a lobster in his refrigerator at home, and he was almost certain they'd never had trout at his house either. He wondered what trout tasted like. He thought about what it felt like to be a fish caught and pulled out of the water. Somewhere he'd heard that lobsters were thrown into a pot alive and boiled to death. He didn't think he'd ever want to eat a creature that was killed under those circumstances. He shuddered and quickly moved on the next question. 2. How many ounces are there in a 5-pound bag of sugar? A. 20, B. 50, C. 80, or D. None of the above? How many ounces are there in a 5-pound bag of sugar? I bet you can go look in the cupboard and see how many ounces are in a 5-pound bag of sugar if mom or dad or grandma has some at home. The reference to the 5-pound bag of sugar immediately made Julio think of his grandmother. One of the results of her medical examination was the discovery that she was pre-diabetic. Julio had been very alarmed when he heard the news. Diabetic sounded like it had something to do with dying. He was relieved when his mother explained that it concerned the sugar in his grandmother's system and how her body used it. For the time being, she wasn't taking any special medication, but she had been told to greatly reduce the amount of sugar and sweets that she consumed. In the past, Julio's grandmother had always put 3 teaspoons of sugar into her coffee in the morning. Now, she was using an artificial sweetener. More important, Ramon was told not to bring home any more donuts. Julio's oldest brother worked in a donut shop. He received the minimum wage and all the leftover donuts he wanted. Sometimes he would bring home a dozen day-old jelly donuts or custard creams. Now, although their grandmother was the only one who had been forbidden to eat sweets, their mother felt it would be unfair to have the donuts in the house to tempt her. They really aren't good for any of us, Mrs. Sanchez told her boys. Well, Ramon could eat some at work if he wanted, but Julio felt deprived. He missed the bag of donuts that had been sitting on the counter when he came home from school every day. Now, reading the problem in front of me, Julio thought about those donuts. Then, although it wasn't part of the problem, he wondered how many teaspoons were in a 5-pound bag of sugar. He could imagine his grandmother happily spooning them into her coffee. She said she didn't like the aftertaste of the artificial sweetener. Sugar was better. Around him, Julio began to hear a shuffling of paper and scraping of feet. Someone dropped a pencil on the floor and someone else sneezed. He looked up and saw that many of his classmates seemed to have finished the question. Now they were waiting restlessly for the slow pokes like him. He felt that twinge in his gut again and sighed. Another of his grandmother's problems was that she had developed a nervous stomach. As he sat looking at the test paper before him, Julio decided he must have the same problem. His stomach hadn't bothered him before Mrs. Schrelenberg handed out the papers. Julio knew what was causing his pains, but he didn't know what could be bothering his grandmother. Maybe she worried too much about the fate of the characters in the soap operas she watched every day. "All right, everyone, put down your pencils and we'll discuss the questions," called out Mrs. Schrelenberg. "These word problems are one type of math that will be covered on the statewide test. You didn't find them too hard now, did you?" she asked. Hard? Julio hadn't answered a single one. There were still 8 more problems that he hadn't even read. Cricket raised her hand. "You mean they actually give us the answer to every question? All we have to do is pick it out from the wrong ones?" she asked. "That's right. Or occasionally they try to fool you and not give you the answer at all. Then you should mark none of the above, or don't have enough information. So it's really like a game," said Cricket with a huge smile on her face. "It's like being on a quiz show on TV." "That's a great attitude," Mrs. Schrelenberg said, beaming back at her student. "The only problem is no one is going to win any prizes here," complained Lucas. "Education is its own reward," Mrs. Schrelenberg told him. The students began going over the problems one by one. The trout was bigger than the lobster. There were 8 ounces in 5-pound bag of sugar, and so on and so forth. Zoe Mitchell, who was every bit as smart as Cricket, raised her hand. "Are all the math questions this easy?" she asked. "Or did you just give us some simple ones for a start?" "If you read each question carefully, you'll find that you'll be able to answer most of them. And that's the whole key to test taking. Read slowly and carefully. Be sure you understand what the question is asking you. When you don't know the answer, skip that question and move on to the next one. You can come back and reread the difficult question afterward instead of spending too much time worrying about what you don't know." Julio looked down at his paper. He had marked each question with the correct answer as they'd gone over them, but he worried. Julio had been so busy thinking about the topics covered in the sentences that he hadn't even answered a single one. Reluctantly, he raised his hand. "How much time do we get to do the test?" he asked. "Don't worry about the time. You'll have more than enough," Mrs. Schrelenberg said. Enough time for Cricket, enough time for Lucas, enough time for Zoe, Julio thought, and just enough time for me to fail this test. And then what? Next year, when all his classmates are in 5th grade, he'd probably be back repeating 4th grade. And they certainly wouldn't put him back in Mrs. Schrelenberg's class again just because he could pronounce her name and he could spell it now too didn't mean that he was bright. In fact, today he felt very stupid. And that's the end of chapter 5, 5 pounds of sugar. Tomorrow's reading will be chapter 6, Ramon's test. All right, 4th graders, we'll see you tomorrow. Enjoy the rest of your day.